I've had enough time with both the M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pros, both the 14 and 16 inch, and I think it's time for me to give you my thoughts as well as some recommendations on which configuration of models you should go for. Hello everyone, my name's Mike, and here at Tech Car Moon I uncover Apple tech and Apple related tech, so hit that subscribe button if that's what you're into. I'll start off by saying that the M1 MacBook Air is going to be enough for many of you watching right now. There will always be something bigger and better around the corner, and if you are someone that's got the budget for these, then obviously keep watching and figure out which configuration is best for you. But for most people, you should not be giving the M1 MacBook Air a miss because this is a fantastic laptop. When I first got these MacBooks, I was extremely surprised. You only got to watch my unboxing videos for that. Gone it seems Apple's need to make everything thinner and lighter because these new MacBooks feel thick, like they're thick boys. They actually aren't even that much thicker dimension wise compared to last year's model, but what they actually did, which I find much better, is the fact they've gone for a more boxy and squared off design to allow for more tech and better cooling. More on that later, but it really does look like Apple has remembered that pros don't like to sacrifice performance for unnecessary thinness. It does make me wonder though, what if Apple had stuck with this design in the old Intel chips? Would they have performed a little bit better? We'll never know. Anyway, I love the new little touches like the taller and more substantial feet and the embossed metal MacBook Pro logo on the bottom. It makes it look more premium. They've also added this anodized black around the keyboard, which makes it stand out just a little bit. This has the magic keyboard switches that we have come to know and love from last year's model. Whether you love it or hate it, the touch bar is gone, and we now have full-size function row keys and a new Touch ID switch as well. For those who actually like the touch bar, well, all that I can say is get over it because by the end of this year, potentially next year, we're not going to be seeing it on any new MacBooks. Here's a quick type test for those who are interested. Next to the keyboard, we have some fantastic speakers. The 14-inch speakers are almost as good as the 16-inch and are definitely better than any other laptop I've tried. These have 6-speaker sound system with 4 force-cancelling woofers, which reveals up to a half an octave deeper notes and have 80% more bass than the previous models. They also have high-performance tweeters and they do an awesome job. These speakers also now support spatial audio when playing music or video with Dolby Atmos, creating this 3-dimensional soundstage, which obviously isn't as good as a true soundstage system of course, but it does improve the soundstage of the laptop speakers in general. The 16-inch does sound a little bit better than the 14-inch, despite Apple saying that they're identical on both models. Anyway, here's a sound test comparing the two MacBooks. The screen lid is actually thicker than the previous years, however, this is for a good reason. This has the best display on any Mac right now, and dare I say, on any laptop on the market right now. Both the 14 and 16-inch models have a PPI of 254, which is sharper than last year's model. Yes, it's not 4K, but with 3K on the 14-inch and 3.5K on the 16-inch, it's close, and trust me, it's really sharp. They have a 1000 nit sustained brightness with 1600 nit peak brightness with fantastic color accuracy. This is thanks to the new mini LED display technology, which has 10,000 mini LEDs, which has local dimming for up to 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio for those very deep blacks. Watching HDR content is just amazing, but for me, it's the fact that it has a 10-bit panel, meaning that when I'm editing photos and videos, it's the best experience I've ever had. The bezels are super thin, and when I go back to my M1 MacBook Air, I actually don't like that screen, despite that screen actually being really good for the price. Now yes, this has the notch, but look, we're still getting the same 16:10 aspect ratio below the notch, but now, rather than on the old screen where the status bar was taking up some of that room, the status bar is now moved up around the notch, meaning that we're getting more content below the notch for things like photo, video, content creation, video consumption, you name it. There's just a lot more to do on the screen now that there is a notch and having the status bar on the top. If you want to know more about the notch, I did do a whole video on it, so I won't get into it here, but watch that video if you want to know. In the notch houses a 1080p camera, which is the best webcam on any MacBook so far. Here's a quick test of the webcam as well as the microphones on these things to see how it performs. The microphones I was really impressed with, but it's very similar to last year's model. Here is a test of the webcam and microphones on the M1 Pro, M1 Max MacBook Pros, and this is what it sounds like. To me, I think that the microphone quality is actually really good. The webcam, even though yes, it's 1080p, could do with a little bit of work. Another big change are the ports. So on the left side, we have the MagSafe connector, 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports and a headphone jack. And then on the right side, we have an HDMI 2.0 port, another Thunderbolt 4 port and a UHS 2 card reader. Now look, unpopular opinion here, but I would have preferred Apple to have swapped out the HDMI 2.0 port for another Thunderbolt port, but that's just me. If you are coming from a 2016 MacBook or newer, then you probably have all of the adapters that you need right now. But I guess if you're coming from a 2015 or older MacBook Pro, then these updates to the ports are going to be extremely useful for your desk setups, and I think Apple are specifically targeting those who have held on to their legendary 2015 MacBooks and getting them to switch to these new ones. MagSafe is a super nice touch. On the 16-inch you get a 140 watt charger, and on the 14-inch you can configure it with a 46 watt MagSafe charger, but the base model that I have here only comes with a 67 watt charger, which means that you will lose out on the fast charging. Fast charging enables you to charge your 16 and 14-inch MacBook Pros to 50% in just 30 minutes. My recommendation is, if you are going for the base model, spend the extra $20 for the faster charger so that you can get the fast charging capabilities. The magnets on the new MagSafe charger are so much stronger than the old ones, meaning that they actually stay connected when you have them plugged in. Okay, performance time. Firstly, if you want a gaming machine, these aren't it, because a Windows laptop at around £1,500 to £2,000 will outperform these any day of the week. Plus you've got a much bigger library on a Windows machine, but hopefully you aren't looking at a MacBook for gaming. Yes, they can do it, but it's not designed for it. Also, if you are an engineer that are using Windows only programs like SolidWorks or MATLAB, then I would again recommend get yourself a Windows laptop, because it's going to perform better and be cheaper, because even though yes, you can run Parallels and stuff like that, you're just not unlocking the full performance by doing those things. So you are always better off with those Windows specific applications to just go for a Windows laptop, despite how powerful these laptops are. So the 14-inch configuration I have here is the base model. So that's the 8-core CPU and 14-core GPU. I also have the M1 Max 32-core GPU version of the MacBook Pro, which is the 16-inch just underneath, so that I can give you more meaningful recommendations, as I've used both of them extensively over this time. Look, I'm going to say this. If you are a casual user or student that doesn't do like computer coding or anything intensive, then honestly, just go for the M1 MacBook Air. If you are someone that runs a lot of tabs and applications like Microsoft Office Suite and have a bunch of Chrome tabs running at the same time, then just get yourself the 16GB upgraded version of this and you'll be absolutely fine. Even for creating social media content, you don't need the 14-inch MacBook Pro M1 Pro, because performance-wise, the M1 MacBook Air is going to be fine for you. Only go for the 14 or 16-inch MacBook Pro if you just want a better screen and better sort of editing experience, but like I said, realistically, this is going to be more than enough. When it comes to video editing, I did find that the M1 Pro, MacBook Pro, was twice as quick to render out as the M1, but that's because of the dedicated encoders and decoders that the M1 just doesn't have, whereas on the M1 Pro it does. I would recommend you not going for the M1 Max if you don't get paid for any of your content creation work. The M1 will be more than enough, and if you are doing a little bit more effects and stuff like that, then just upgrade it to 16GB and you're going to be absolutely fine. Everything else on this side, like the 14-inch and 16-inch, is going to be overkill for you. If you do get paid for your work, and let's say you are more of a full-time content creator working with higher end cameras like the A7S III or higher, then the M1 Pro can handle all of your work, to be honest, because the 4K multicam footage and higher frame rate 4K footage was much better at playback and editing than the M1, especially if you are doing much more complex color grading, effects, and even some intense audio editing on it. Me personally, I wouldn't upgrade the base to the 10-core CPU unless you plan on working with some high resolution images or you are a graphics artist. Spending the extra $200 on that 10-core CPU will be worth it. Also, I wouldn't bother spending the extra $100 on the 16-core GPU variant of this thing because real world performance wise, I saw no improvements. Now, if you are a Final Cut Pro editor and you are using the Motion VFX 3D graphics plugin, it actually made almost no difference in performance with the 16-core, 32-core GPU, any of the core GPUs. So unless Motion VFX actually changes how it performs with the GPU, the base M1 Pro is going to be enough performance with those 3D graphics. Now, I will say that if you are working with high-end footage and you're adding a lot of motion tracked effects and stuff like that, then I will recommend you go for the 32GB of unified memory, as I did find that the 16GB of memory was hitting pressure at times, and to be honest, if you plan on using more of those things, then it's only going to get worse over the years as video editors start adding more and more plugins with more complex features. For music artists, the M1 Pro with the 10-core CPU upgrade for $200 would be worth it, as this is going to help with live recordings and latency, as well as mixing complex tracks over the base M1 Pro. Upgrading to 32GB of unified memory is also advisable. I would also recommend you go for the same configuration for video editors and graphics artists. I have seen tests from other channels saying that 16GB is fine, but honestly, when you are actually working on those photos, 16GB just wasn't quite enough for working with high resolution images and multi-layer graphics. And I'm talking not like 30 megapixel images, I'm talking like 35 to 50, 55 megapixel images and obviously complex graphics. The 32GB of RAM honestly is going to be a lifesaver for you guys. If you are someone who is a coder or a computer science student, then the M1 Pro will be much better than the M1. I would recommend you get the CPU upgrade to the 10-core M1 Pro, but I wouldn't go for the M1 Max because you're not going to benefit for the amount of money that you're going to be ending up spending. I will say right now, Blender will perform better with NVIDIA graphics cards equipped laptops than using these M1 and M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, because unfortunately right now on macOS, Blender isn't optimized for GPU rendering. Now there will be a Mac update soon with Blender that will enable GPU rendering, but right now I would say just hold off and let me just do some testing once that is out, just so that we can see what the performance difference is like with the GPUs being enabled on these new MacBooks. I think for most non-professional or prosumers, the 16GB base model will be enough, but I will say it's a little bit hard to say that the 16GB is going to be perfect long term, because I've seen a lot of applications not quite making full use of these chips yet, and I think that's because obviously they're just so new. So I will be doing more updates to this review and to some of my tests as applications start to become more and more optimized, and I'm definitely going to be keeping you guys up to date with that, so obviously stay subscribed to see that. So yeah, overall I think that these machines are fantastic. I think most of you will be fine with the M1 MacBook Air, and to be honest, I wouldn't go for the M1 Pro. I would just skip that model entirely. And then your starting point, if you need anything more than that, should be the base M1 MacBook Pro. I think that in certain instances you should upgrade, but right now I am really struggling to find a reason, unless if you're at that sort of really top end level, to go for the M1 Max variant of either the 14 or 16 inch. For me, I just think that your money is better off spent elsewhere, because the performance difference at this level, it's not enough to justify certain workloads. But there we have it. As always, this is a discussion, so please leave a comment down below on whether you agree or disagree with any of my points and which MacBook you're gonna end up going for. I definitely went for more than I need. But yeah, you let me know what you're going to be getting and what you're going to be using it for, because I want to know why you picked a certain configuration over another. Also, check out the links down in the description below to support the channel. If you haven't already, please follow me on Twitter at TechCarMoon, drop me a like in this video and hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you get notified of any future videos. Also, if you want to watch more videos from me right now, you guys know what to do. There are 2 videos right over here. Go ahead, click it. You're gonna absolutely love it. Anyway, look after yourselves and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.